Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are and wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, a creative content writer here in Chesterfield, and I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. We are working our way through the various districts, talking with the various boards and supervisors members. We had Kevin Carroll on several weeks ago. We've got Jim Ingle on here today from the Bermuda district. Mr. Ingle, welcome to the podcast again. Sir, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today, Brad?
I'm doing very well, sir. Really appreciate the time. We had you back on, I think it was episode 6 of the show, way back in its infancy, back in December 2021. A lot has changed, obviously, through the county, and we'll get into some of that, and obviously a lot going on going into the rest of the spring. But before we do that, I kind of want to, this is the first time we've had a chance to have you on since you were elected as vice chair of the board. Obviously, I would imagine a fairly eventful moment for you to be trusted with that sort of leadership role on the board. And I'm just curious to get your sort of point of view on that. As somebody, we talked before about sort of how you got into this, and I'm just curious, when you were elected as vice chair, what did that mean to you, and what's it been like in the first couple months of the year to sort of get used to being in that role?
Well, first off, it was humbling to be elected to represent my district in the first place.
Right.
And then to have the opportunity to serve in leadership on this board has also meant a lot to me personally. I want to thank the other board members that gave me this opportunity, and I would like to say that the whole board now, with the exception of somebody that just got on,
right,
has had the opportunity to be in leadership. And I think that's been healthy for this board to be able to share leadership roles. Mm-hmm. It's definitely got more meetings than it did before. And I get to be included in things a little bit earlier than I was before.
Right.
But overall, we've had great communication on the board, mm-hmm. and we've had leadership in the past that shared what was going on.
Right.
Kevin Carroll and I are trying to do the same,
right,
and to reciprocate to our other board members with that communication on everything that we're talking about.
Right. And has it been anything? I mean, has it been a different sort of experience to be, in one of those leadership positions versus just a member of the board? Has there been anything that you've seen from a different side that maybe has really sort of broadened maybe your view of being a board member? How has being in that role sort of changed the way you see being a supervisor, in the big picture?
Well, as vice chair, we don't have the exact same responsibilities as the chair. So I haven't had to sign letters just about every day that are going somewhere. So I've had a little bit of a learning curve to the leadership.
Right.
I have a much better understanding of what the chair does than I did before.
Right.
And I'm prepared in the need to step up and to fulfill that role.
Right.
Definitely have more responsibility as far as meeting with the leaders in the region from other jurisdictions than I've had in the past, and those opportunities have been good for me to be able to have personally.
Right. Yeah.
I look forward to more of those discussions with leaders in the other jurisdictions, as well as growing in a new role on the board.
Yep.
And, at some point in the future, if I am able to be reelected by the citizens in my district, I hope that I would have an opportunity to be chair in the future.
It's pretty cool. So in terms of 2023 in the big picture, it's gotten off to an interesting start, right? There's been a lot of stuff going on. It feels like we talked with Garrett Hart in December on episode 34 about sort of just the amount of economic development projects that come through the county, and the way that could really help change sort of the complexity of the budget and the bringing in more revenue. Therefore, you're not so reliant on the residents and that kind of stuff. But I want to get your sort of point of view on those announcements in 2022. Obviously, Lego, plenty, As I said, we have a whole episode about them. I mean, Chesterfield was just, it was an incredible year in 2022. To do that again in 2023, I don't know how you would even start to, how do you land another Lego? But in terms of your point of view on those, how important do you feel like those are, in your opinion, both to the county as a whole and especially to your district specifically? What makes them so essential for the county in your view?
Well, Lego, Plenty, and Civica all are big announcements, all in the Bermuda district. Big picture for the county, they end up being approximately worth 5 cents on the real estate tax rate. And 5 cents can go a long ways in two different directions. One, we know that there are other needs in the county that we would like to be able to fund, but we also recognize that even though we've cut rates, we haven't actually cut what people pay in taxes. Their taxes have still gone up.
Right.
And we have to be mindful of delivering the services that bring quality of life to our citizens, but doing it at a level that also doesn't impact their quality of life on the negative side in their tax revenue. So with that 5 cents, we can do more, and we should be able to rely less on that real estate rate so that we can cut that rate hopefully in the future as we go along. If we can continue to have a few more of these projects, it would absolutely make a difference in what our people pay in taxes,
and especially too because you're not. It's like it's a win all around, right? Because you've not only got the tax revenue piece of it, but then you've also got the jobs, and I think for a lot of people, the idea of sort of what industrial was, we've talked about this on several episodes of the podcast thus far. The idea that, we think of smokestacks and, greasy hands and guys with, bad backs and, the work, right? But now it's clean rooms and there's a lot that goes into it. Certainly Lego bringing, such a international presence and having their first, U.S. plant here in Chesterfield. I can imagine that the idea of having companies like Lego do business with Chesterfield and bringing those jobs is such a big deal too, not just for, like I said, the tax revenue piece, but then also, the workforce, right? If you want to have a thriving community, you got to be able to, what's the adage, right? To live, play, and work, right? I can imagine as a supervisor, the idea of being able to bring that sort of project to your district. There are only but so many Legos, what was that when you first started sort of hearing about that and it kind of came together? What was it like to be through that process? How did you, you're always excited, but you're always just sort of like, man, I really hope this, comes through. What was it like when that process was all unfolding?
Well, in the beginning, they didn't even tell us who who it might be coming because of non-disclosure.
Right. Yeah.
It's my understanding that Lego even sent people into the country and into Chesterfield County under names that weren't even theirs because they didn't want people to know what they were thinking and where they may end up.
That's fascinating.
So it's always interesting to watch how that happens, and sometimes it's frustrating because as we do learn who the potential company that may be coming to town is, and Lego and Plenty are both giants in their industries. As we talk to them and we get to meet them for the first time, and it becomes real, that hey, Lego really is looking at coming to Chesterfield County, it's almost surreal, just to have a brand that is so internationally
and so beloved,
and to have the opportunity to have it not only in Chesterfield County but also in my district.
Your district, right?
It really is very humbling to be a part of that.
Yeah. Now, in turn, you mentioned the tax rate just a few minutes ago. It's budget season, so I can't very well have you on the podcast and not talk a little bit about it. For folks who are interested, we did a Budget 101 show with Matt Harris and Gerard Durkin, episode 40, and then we also broke down the proposed budget in 41. Now, as we record this, it's currently March the 16th. So the community meetings have been happening throughout the county. There's obviously this whole entire process, as Matt really hammered home the idea of process, and that was a really big focus for the entire organization going into putting together this proposed budget. In terms of what you've heard from folks in your district, folks around the county, you recently had the chance to hold your community meeting. What sort of feedback have you heard from folks about the budget, about the plans? Obviously, there's a lot in there for comprehensive tax relief, in addition to, as Matt said, the and piece of this, right? The idea of being able to do tax relief and to do a lot of the things that the residents of Chesterfield just frankly have come to expect the county to be able to deliver in terms of services. As you've heard from folks in your district and beyond, what have been some of the feedback that you've heard, and kind of what are your thoughts as we sit here, well in advance of the public hearing and everything on the budget, but just curious to get some of your thoughts on kind of where things are in the process and how it's going.
Well, the process in general, unfortunately, for budgeting is broken.
Yeah.
Schools have to go first.
Yeah.
They have to have their proposal into the county administrator by the end of February, beginning of March.
Right.
The county has to have theirs in April.
Right.
And the state theoretically would go before us, but they don't.
Right.
And they don't seem to have a sense of urgency right now.
Right.
And it does leave some things in flux.
Right.
Big picture, I think, from the feedback that I've received, there's still some concern on the school side.
Right.
Because the budget that they proposed and where we are right now, there's still a gap that hasn't been filled. We do believe that a good portion of that, if not all of that gap that we have left, will be filled by the state, but we don't have any guarantees of that.
Right, you don't know, and you don't even know when that word's coming.
And so we may end up at some point having to pass a budget that doesn't completely fill that gap. After we hear from the state and we know where the state actually is, we have committed to working together, schools and the county, to make sure that not only are we taking care of our citizens on the county side, but that we're also serving all of our citizens and our children through schools.
Yeah.
And I believe we're going to get to a place where we're able to honor all the commitments that have been made. Mm-hmm. I wish I could guarantee that.
Right.
I can't.
Yeah.
But I would say that if you see this podcast before the state has made their decisions, we've heard from people, especially from schools, and we've reached out as a board to the state with a letter asking them to fund schools. Mm-hmm. And we would ask that any citizen that's reached out to us on the county level to fund schools also reach out to the state level representatives, because it's going to be important for their voice to be heard, so that we can make sure that schools are funded properly. There's some things that people may not know. For instance, in Chesterfield County, we fund over 600 teachers, maybe as many as 650, and over 900 with those teachers included, over 900 staff in the classroom, 100% out of county funds with zero funding from the state, because their support cap is on, and that prohibits them from giving us extra money. So if they just took the support cap off, we would have more than enough money from the state to make up the gap that we have. Yeah. So schools are extremely important. We need to continue to work with them, but we really do need the state to fund their share. If you look at the local composite index and what the state puts in and use that to base what the county should put in on their funding formulas, the county is actually putting in $170 million more than what the state says the county needs to fund. Now, we know that's ridiculous, right? Because we still have a gap, and we still have things we need to take care of in schools. But that, to me, shows how much of a gap in unfunded mandates that the state has, that they put into the schools, that has to be picked up by the county to be able to properly serve our students. And so all we're asking is that when the state puts something in, that they fund it. And if they remove the funding, they remove the mandate. And if they do just that, we can better serve our students, and we can make sure we don't have those gaps in the future. as far as the rest of it, there's always somebody that isn't 100% satisfied.
Of course, right.
And that's
just the process.
A big county. We have a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different thought processes. But in general, we seem to have pretty good consensus that the other stuff that we're doing to add police officers, firefighters, other staff as needed, and reduction in the rates in the big picture have been well received by the citizens.
Yeah. Real quick on the school front, I for folks who maybe aren't, who aren't aware of how this process works. So the county has to put forward a balanced budget, but the state typically in the past, years ago, you would have the schools, county, everybody would have had all the information on the table well into the process. Now, because of not just because of sort of the politics of Richmond, but also too the extra pressure there is that what Mr. Ingle's mentioned in there, that that index. So essentially, the way it works is that each locality, the state sort of figures out how much that locality can put towards education. And it the way they kind of do that is based on sort of like, you can think about it like the wealth, so to speak, of the county. So they kind of balance that, the number of students, how much money that county brings in. So for example, if you had a place with a lot of students where there was a lot of wealth, but maybe not a lot of people, right, that would put an undue burden sort of on the actual residents of that county. So the state tries to do with that index, or at least historically has tried to do, is to try to balance that out. Unfortunately, to Mr. Ingle's point here, that can get out of whack depending on, one, cost, and also two, sort of the way that the index sort of leverages the number of students and the number of needs versus what the state's putting on them in terms of the mandates. So I think for folks who are unclear, like to the point, like Chesterfield is routinely, year after year, especially these last few years, put in even more, and the state has just not kept up that end of the bargain. Is that fair to say, Mr. Ingle, you think?
That's absolutely fair to say. And one of the things I've heard is that people believe that Chesterfield is on the higher end of being able to participate in the program.
Right.
But if you look at the LCI that the state puts out, Chesterfield's actually 73rd out of 134 school districts.
Right.
And Richmond and Henrico are actually have a higher percentage that they're supposed to put in through their LCI than Chesterfield. We actually have more Title I students in Chesterfield County than there are total students in the city of Richmond. And I don't think people are aware of that either.
Right.
So as they say, well, we're wealthy. We can afford more tax increases. I've heard that said by several people in the county. And it's true that there are some citizens in Chesterfield that probably could afford to do more in taxes, but there's many more, especially in my district, as I think about the Route 1 corridor, for instance, that additional tax burden on them in a home that they've had for some amount of time, and a lot of them getting closer to fixed incomes or being on fixed incomes, they can't afford that increased tax burden that comes because the state has put unfunded mandates in that the county has to pick up.
Absolutely.
So we have to take all of that into consideration when we make budget decisions, when we make the tax rate decisions. And we need to be as mindful as we can. We need to take the least amount of money possible from our citizens to fund the necessary services that are required to give the quality of life that our citizens deserve in Chesterfield County.
A little more specific to the district. When you were here, I guess December 21, we talked a lot about the superstreet, and I'm just curious to get an update on that. When you were last year, there was a cool animation that we used. I know we got this kind of a different version, more, I guess, informational in terms of explaining sort of how it actually will work once it's put in. So if you're watching this on the YouTube, channel right now, you're probably seeing a version of that, which is from VDOT, which kind of explains what superstreet, or what they call an R-cut, which is a restricted sort of U-turn situation. It kind of goes into the ins and outs of how it works and why that's such a better option for the flow of traffic. But I'm curious to get sort of an update on where that project is, kind of where it stands now, as we start to get into the latter part of spring in 2023.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. We when we met last time, I did mention that it was going to be a ways out.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned at that time that we were thinking 2024. Mm-hmm. We actually had hoped to be at the end of 23, and unfortunately that has at the end of 22.
Gotcha.
And unfortunately that's past us.
Yeah.
We were shooting for the spring, but we feel very confident, and that's a big statement in government,
right. Yeah.
that we will see the completion by June.
Okay.
And I know I mentioned last time I was here that it was going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say I don't believe it's going to get any worse. It's only going to get better from here.
That's great.
We're beyond the it's going to get worse part, and now we're looking for the it's going to get better part between now and the end of June.
I can imagine there are a lot of folks in your district who are very excited to, if you're listening to the audio version, make sure you check out the YouTube so you can check out that link. I'm also going to put it in the show description for this episode. So if you want to go check it out, so you can get a sense of sort of, it takes you through what each lane sort of does, and there's some voiceover, and there's an arrow, and it'll kind of explain to you like how it works. I know in my experience, at least, all of these different things that VDOT does, where you initially look at it and you're like the one, like that version where it kind of crosses over, the one there's one at Zion's on 64 that I'm always seeing. And the first time you go through it, you're just like, wait, what? Because it's just so counter to the way we've always driven. And yet almost, invariably, these things make so much sense when they actually sort of get into it. And I guess I can imagine the folks in your district are really excited about the potential of just having a solution there, even if it's maybe something that's a little bit unorthodox and something that's going to be new for folks.
Well, I appreciate staff going to look for the videos and to be able to put out how it actually works, because quite frankly, we need to do that with roundabouts as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure when all of us took our driver's license test, we remember that section on roundabouts and super streets, and we're all very familiar with how to use them.
It was like number 2, right behind how to parallel park, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, look, real talk. I'm really glad that there wasn't a section, because I'm not sure how I would have passed, honestly. But no, that's a really good point. That so much of this is just so new. And for a lot of folks, like, whether it's roundabouts or, super streets or whatever, there's a significant learning curve for all of us in terms of doing this new stuff. And it's, the idea of like being on the left. I mean, like, if you're in one of those crossover deals and you're on the left side, you're thinking like, what am I, in Britain all of a sudden? Like for a little, it just feels very strange. But after a while, you sort of get used to it, and certainly it helps with the flow of traffic. And at the end of the day, that's the thing that Route 10 needs more than anything else, which is just for folks to be able to get where they need to go in a timely manner, cut down on the number of, of minutes and life lost just sitting around, right? And then also, the number of accidents and things of that nature. I can imagine folks are going to be really excited when that comes through.
Well, I think that it's going to be one of the bigger projects that we've done, especially the biggest one in my district in the county. I think it'll be transformational. We have some other areas in the county that they are looking at possibly putting in some R-cuts or a portion of what we're calling the super street.
Right.
And I think that really that's transformational. We actually are pretty blessed in Chesterfield. Our traffic in most places is not bad.
Right.
And people coming from other areas with more congestion come here and they're like, oh, there's no traffic here. But if you lived here all your life, you have a different perspective, and that perspective is, hey, I'm stuck in traffic I wasn't stuck in before.
Right.
And why isn't the county doing more to plan to fix that?
Yep.
And we have absolutely been working on whether it be the Route 10 Super Street, the improvements that were made at 95 and 10 to help that flow. Mm-hmm. widening projects that we have, bridge replacement projects, raising roads up out of flood areas so that they don't get cut off. We've worked on transportation significantly from the time I've been on the board.
Yep.
And we're moving projects forward that some of them been on the books since maybe 1990s.
Yeah.
And they were a dotted line, and now we're actually seeing some progress in that. For my district, this is really going to help that flow. There's a lot of the people in my district have kids at one end or the other of Route 10, whether it be the middle school in Enon or whether they're coming from Enon up to Thomas Dale.
Right.
As well as just their traffic to get to and from work each day.
For sure.
And I think that as we get used to the new traffic patterns, 4 lanes in each direction, and us understanding it is really going to be transformational for that area. And it does allow us to bring in companies like Lego and Plenty and know that we're going to be able to handle traffic and not make it worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap up, I just want to give you the opportunity. Anything else in Bermuda that you'd like to talk about? Anything that you've got coming up soon? Anything you want to kind of discuss? Any other sort of things on the radar?
So last year in October, after wanting to do, since I was elected, wanting to do community conversations, I was able to have 3 times that I offered for community conversations, and they went extremely well, well attended.
Right.
And I did want to limit them to 30 people or less, and we got the higher end of that, but not quite to 30. I wanted to make sure that people had the opportunity to come in and ask any question they wanted. And we sat down at a table. We talked together as a community.
Yeah.
I didn't answer all the questions, at least not immediately. I let the community talk and get some perspective.
Yeah.
For instance, there was an advocate for bike lanes, and there was another person that didn't understand why we needed bike lanes. And I thought it was healthy for the community to be able to talk back and forth and understand each other a little bit.
Yeah.
That went extremely well. I think everybody that attended those meetings really got a lot out of those meetings. And that was the kickoff for some of the other board members to say, okay, we're coming out of COVID. This is a great thing to do. I believe Mr. Winslow has done community meetings. I believe Mr. Carroll has.
I know Mr. Carroll has. I believe
the other 2 either have or are about to embark on some community meetings. And fortunately, I will be able to start my second round. And quite frankly, I hope to do them quarterly, if not quarterly, at least 3 times a year.
Okay.
Just because I think it's important for the community to have a touch directly to us, even though they can email me, call me, catch me in the grocery store, whatever. All those things happen.
Right.
It's good to not just have the one-on-one, but to have the community and understand each other.
Yeah, for sure.
In those meetings. And so I have a community meeting coming up on the 27th at Thomas Dale Library at 2 p.m. I'm sorry, at the Chester Library at 2 p.m. And then I have on April 11th at Thomas Dale another community meeting that evening. And if you have questions, concerns, something you don't understand, reach out to me anytime. But I would love for you to sign up and come to those community meetings, because I think that they absolutely have benefited everybody that's come. Everybody that came to all 3 of those previous meetings were very thankful, got a lot more insight, and got to meet some of their neighbors too.
For sure.
So I just like to invite people out for that. One of the things that I'm sure will come up in this community meeting is recycling. There's been a lot of misunderstanding of what the county is trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish and why.
Right.
And so I like to just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
So we had a contract in place with CVWMA, and that contract expires on June 30th. So July 1st, we would have had to sign a new contract to stay in with CVWMA. One thing I think our citizens have not heard clearly is that new contract was going to go from $41 a year for our participants to $113 a year.
Right.
And at $113 a year, that's at least 15% more than what we're seeing from most of the private haulers, and some of them may be even a larger reduction than that.
Right.
So what we're trying to do, and we believe we will accomplish, is number one, we're going to expand recycling because the CVWMA contract did not cover apartments, townhouses, and condominium areas. With this, we see more private haulers being able to come in and work with those communities as well. So that will help us to expand the reach.
Right.
At the same time, the cost, even though people are not understanding what we're doing is reducing cost because they think that we're going from $41 to $96. We're really actually, it would be $113, and we're bringing it back down to $96 by getting the government out of the middle.
And they're not, and you're not doing what some of your neighbors in the region are doing, which is they're not saying anything. They're just gonna those fees are gonna get paid somewhere. Chesterfield's not baking those fees in somewhere else. They're actually being transparent and allowing folks to decide for themselves, what makes sense for them, as opposed to, like I said, just continuing on with the contract, but then baking those fees somewhere else, which I think that folks, if you haven't had a chance to, episode 33, we had John Neal from General Services come on and talk about recycling, who I think he does a really good job of, as Mr. Ingle was just kind of alluding to, sort of breaking down sort of where things were going into it. I mean, ultimately, for recycling, the price of the commodity has just changed since that contract came into play. So when it's going to expire, Chesterfield had to do something, and whether that something is, to Mr. Ingle's point here, the idea of allowing people to make their own decision and save money versus the county just makes a decision and bakes that fee in somewhere else and you don't see it, you're still paying it, but then everybody's paying it regardless of whether or not they want to take part in the program or not. I would definitely tell folks, make sure you check out that podcast because there's a lot of great information there from John, kind of explaining why the county came to the conclusion that it came to and why that choice was so, choosing both, whether it's trash or recycling, making those choices for yourself. That was obviously a big focal point for the county going into that.
Well, we also are opening our recycling centers up 7 days a week, and we're going to have a express lane, for lack of a better term, for people that want to do recycling where they don't have to wait in line to pay to be able to drop their recycling off. And we're going to add bins in the parks so that if you're getting ready to go take advantage of some of our parks, you'll be able to bring your recycling with you and drop it off. And that will be at no additional charge to the citizen. It is baked into the taxes. It's going to cost us about $900,000, a little less than that, but approximately $900,000 a year to be able to open the able to open the service center 7 days a week, staff them. But the recycling portion of that is actually fairly small. We do think that we needed to do that anyways for our citizens, because if we were closed on Tuesday and Wednesday or Wednesday and Thursday, the lines to get into those centers the day that we reopened sometimes were much greater than we would want people to wait in. So
absolutely.
So a lot of that cost is through, to take care of the centers in general, but it's absolutely to help with recycling. So there is a small amount of taxes that are baked into what we're doing to make it free for those that would like to take it themselves there.
Right.
Which free isn't always free, as you said.
Yep.
But it's a nominal amount. And overall, we believe that we are, again, expanding opportunity for people to recycle at a lower cost.
Yeah. Well, like I said, folks, check out episode 33 if you haven't had a chance to already. And definitely, if you're in the Bermuda District, make sure you check out the community conversation meetings coming up soon. But Mr. Ingle, thank you very much for coming on the podcast again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield, Virginia, all one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Make sure to like that page so you can keep up with us as we go forward. Now, let me tell you about all the ways you can check us out. You can watch us on our YouTube channel, as well as on our website at chesterfield.gov/podcast. An audio-only version of the show is available there, as well as on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, and a whole host of other services. You can also watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7, on the weekends at noon. That's Comcast Channel 98 and Verizon Channel 28. And lastly, you can check out chesterfield.gov/connect with us for more ways for you to get in touch with us and for us to get in touch with you. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, our executive producers, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Communication Media for all that they do. And my thanks to you for joining us today. So, from all of us here in Chesterfield County, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care.